Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this presentation. Tonight, we are going to talk about the county school superintendents of Wilson County. And it is rather fitting that we're doing this program on the first day of Fredonia City Schools for this year's season. So I want to talk to you tonight about the county school superintendents and what their position was and their relationship to what we now know as the current superintendent situation, where every district has their own superintendent. So these county superintendents started out in the year 1866. Wilson County has had a county superintendent since then, the post being one of the ranking offices in the early days of county politics. The county superintendent was responsible for certifying the teachers, giving teachers examinations, holding Teachers Institute to prepare teachers, and often these teachers were only high school graduates themselves, and to instruct a one-room school which ran from grade 1 through 8 and often included students older than the teacher. And they were picking up a little reading and ciphering during slow seasons in the farm work. The county superintendent was an important figure in the county spelling bees and the last day of school exercises. So that individual was pretty visible in all the little one-room schools. Often he also was a popular speaker at patriotic and political gatherings. Now, it's no mistake that we use the pronoun he, but I will address that and how that changed over time. So what was happening was that as larger communities were being established, like Fredonia Schools and Altoona and Neodesha, they had their own superintendent, and those superintendents answered more directly to the state leader of the educational group. But the small schools, and there were many in this county, they answered to the county superintendent. So the first one was W.G. Williams, and his term was from 1886 to 87. And the last one was Louise Rankin in 1966 to 1969. In all, there were 27 county superintendents. And the Historical Museum does not have photographs of all of those, but I'd like to share a few of them with you, share a little bit of history or information about some names that some of you listening might recognize, and a little bit about Butt School, and see how that ties into the people that I will know. So the first one I want to show you a picture of is H.A. Brundage. H.A. Brundage, and he was at one time a pastor of the Altoona Congregational Church from 1895 to 96. So that was after his term as county school superintendent. Josie Park, and she was a Mound School second and third grade teacher, 1900 to 1901. And we believe this is a picture of her. She was county superintendent 1907 to 1911. Fanny Butts, yes, that was her real name. She was county superintendent from 1911 to 1917. And in this photograph, we see her when she was a teacher at Mound School in 1897. So we see her sitting kind of in the middle on the porch, and here's a little enlarged picture of her. I love the detail in the photos. Always there's one individual that's not paying attention when somebody says, look at the camera. So here she is when she was principal of the Mound School teachers. She's there in the center and all of the women teachers, and the majority of them were women. She is buried in Fredonia Cemetery, and this is a plot that is in the kind of the northwest part of the cemetery, and you'll see this little curbing here, and it's not visible in this particular picture, but there is on the curbing engraved, it says Butts, so we know that it is a family plot. And she was, again, we see Frances, or Fanny as she was known, born 1865 to 1923. And I want to share a little bit more about her. She did die in California, at her home in Beckley, California, November 18, 1923. She was never married. She taught, as I said, in the Fredonia schools, was county superintendent for 3 terms, and those were 2-year terms, so she served 6 years. And she moved to San Diego to be near her sister. She graduated from San Diego Normal School, which is what they called the teacher's college at that time, or the education that a prospective teacher might get. And then she returned to Fredonia to teach. The timing on that has something to do with the death of her parents. So I'll get into that a little bit more. But I do want to share an article with you that she wrote when she was county superintendent. This was in 1917. She was finishing up her term, and she was talking about the school that was going to be taking place that summer for the prospective teachers. And she also gives kudos to the woman that was coming after her. Now, the next superintendent, her name was Fanny Lyon, Mrs. Fanny Lyon, Lyon. And at first, when I looked through this list, I thought, oh, did Fanny get married? Is this the same person? But I drilled down a little bit deeper, and no, it's 2 separate Fannys right in a row. So this article from the Fredonia Weekly Herald, Friday, May 18, 1917, the headline is, Wilson County Normal Institute opens June 4. The Wilson County Normal Institute will begin a 4-week session at the Fredonia High School building June 4. An excellent corps of instructors has been secured for the work of the various departments. Each is a specialist in his particular field. Teachers who have not already planned to attend summer school cannot spend a month more profitably than at the Wilson County Institute. Afternoon classes with long recitation periods for those who are working toward a first grade certificate will meet the needs of this class. Special classes in primary work will also meet in the afternoon. This arrangement makes it possible to give the whole forenoon to the work which every teacher finds in his schoolroom, and which he must know how to teach if he wishes to succeed. Stress will be placed on method of teaching rather than on academic work. Mrs. Fanny Lyon, the newly elected superintendent of Wilson County, will conduct the institute. So this was part of the job of the county superintendent, to lead this instruction for teachers. Mrs. Lyon has been doing professional work in the Pittsburgh State Normal School since January and will come to the institute full of enthusiasm, which has always characterized that institution. Superintendent Decker of the Fredonia schools will have charge of classes in methods, history, English literature, and related subjects. Mr. Decker has had several years of institute work, and his years of supervision make him an instructor of unusual worth. The teachers are fortunate in having this opportunity to work with Mr. Decker. And it goes on talking about several specific teachers, Mr. Matthews, Ms. Stewart, also taught in that normal school. And Fanny ends with her article in the newspaper with, this is Fanny Butts, with hoping that the Institute of 1917 may prove one of the most helpful ever held in the county, and that out of it may come increased efficiency to the teaching forces of Wilson County, is the earnest wish of one who has labored 6 years to have our schools keep pace with educational advancement. Now, it was during this period of time that Fanny Butts's mother passed away. I believe it was in 1916. And there is a really notable article in the newspaper about the Butts farm. And I want to digress a little bit because it's such an interesting little tidbit that I stumbled across. So this is in the Wilson County Citizen, Friday, October 13, 1916. And the headline reads, Butts farm sold. 9-year-old millionaire is purchaser. The heirs of the late Mrs. H.F. Butts, who was Fanny Butts's mother, have disposed of the old homestead south of Fredonia, a sale being completed this week when the property, 75 acres, was purchased by Mr. and Mrs. John Bair for $6,000 cash. The Bairs, that's spelled B-A-I-R-S, the Bairs have immediate possession and expect to move here from Caney, their present residence, this week. Miss Fanny Butts will live in Fredonia until the expiration of her term as County Superintendent of Instruction, going then to San Diego, where she will make her home with her sister. And then it lists her name and several other heirs. The Butts place was purchased through the clerk of the District Court of Shawnee County, Oklahoma, W.R. Castell, guardian of the 9-year-old son of Mrs. Bair, named Edwin. He is owner of wonderfully valuable oil lands in the Oklahoma field, his Indian ancestry giving the youngster, who is but 9 years old, the possession of the tracts. The little fellow has an income at present of $10,000 a month, and his property is worth more than $750,000. The Fredonia location was chosen because the relatives of the little boy want to have a home for him near a good town, where there are school facilities and the proper atmosphere, and Fredonia was the first choice of the interested parties. Young Bair will attend public school here and will grow to manhood in this community, according to the present plans of his guardian and his mother. The Butts farm was the first place settled in this section, and Mrs. H.F. Butts, who came here from Kentucky in 1867, was the oldest settler in the township at the time of her death recently. The farmhouse and land will be improved soon by Mr. and Mrs. Bair, who are very much pleased with the town and its territory. So that's really an interesting sidelight to some of the Osage oil resources from Oklahoma and the impact that it apparently had here in Wilson, the reach it had here in Wilson County. Now, when I first came across Fanny Butts' name on this list, I thought, oh, was Butts School named after her? What's the connection there? So I discovered the connection. So Fanny Butts' father was named Alex or Alexander, and through research with the Register of Deeds, we discovered that the land was purchased by Alexander Butt, and on the deed it says Butt, B-U-T-T, not B-U-T-T-S. Somewhere later in the files there an affidavit saying that it was really with an S on the end. So in, let's see, 1870, Alexander Butts purchased this property from the Osage Trust lands. So he was the first white owner of the land, and where Butts School was, and then later sold it to the school district. So a little bit, just a tiny little bit about Butts School District, to give you that background. It was organized December 11, 1868, but it would be another 4 years or so before the first school term was started then. For some reason in 1874, it was known as Sand Hill College, and there was some connection with some story there with the principal of that school, but that was only known that way for 1 year, I believe. In 1910, it became a 2-teacher school. 1912, there was a new brick building. 3 years later, that building was gutted by fire, and at that time, the school was held in the loft of the, quote, Morris barn across the road. To the south, the property was owned by the Morris family. In the 1920s, Butts School was the first school to serve a hot lunch, and I have a little anecdote about that I want to share. It's kind of interesting to me. In the 1920s also, there was a teacher named Louis Martin, and he helped a Jewish immigrant from Russia who couldn't speak any English. More about that later, but let's look at a picture of the old Butts School. So it faced south, and there is a drawing that shows this school in front of, and when I say in front of, I mean to the south of the present building that is on that property, the present Butts School. So this was there, the new one was built, and then this one torn down. So the museum has in its files a narrative or remembrance of Butts School history by Jerry Mahan. So I want to pick out a few interesting things about that. It was a frame building. The original building was a frame building, outside toilets, a water bucket with a tin dipper from which everyone drank. The water supply came from a spring across the road, and that was again on that Leo Morris property at that time. The bigger boys went for the water with the bucket. Books were few, generally a speller, a reader, and arithmetic, and the library was small. And as I said, Butts was a two-teacher school in 1910. They received $70.25 a month for their services. Let's see. When the school burned in 1915, school was held in the loft of the barn across the road the rest of that spring. So it sounds like the Morris family was very closely tied to that school and the learning and the life that went on in that school. When the building was rebuilt, it was dug out for a basement, and at that time the building was heated by a coal furnace in the basement. Butts School was the first school in the county to serve a hot lunch. In those days, the lunch consisted of one item: chili, potato or tomato soup, or beans. Bean Day was the day the pupils looked forward to. The food was contributed by the parents and prepared by the teachers and older children. Mrs. Irene Goff tells us that children were divided into groups of 2. Each group took their turn watching the food one day. The next day they washed the dishes. Lunches were free. The system was still in operation 20 years ago, and I don't really have a date on this document, but I think that might have been in the 40s that she's referring to. Butts School was also the first school in the county to have public school music, and that was as early as 1929. A music teacher came to the school, was how that was handled. Well, then gas lights were installed, later replaced by electric lights, so they were keeping up to date as much as possible. The coal furnace was replaced by gas stoves. Modern restrooms were added. Drinking fountain replaced the bucket and the cup in the early 1930s. Mrs. Beulah Kane, some of you may remember that name. She was a longtime Register of Deeds. She attended that school, and she also taught that school in 1929 to 1934, and then later she became one of the county superintendents. She tells of the time she taught at Butts School. There was a combination horse barn and garage. The north half was for the horses ridden to school by the pupils, and the south half was used by the 2 teachers for their cars. In the 1920s, there was a teacher here by the name of Lewis Martin. He was considered quite exceptional because of the extra help he gave a Jewish boy who newly arrived here from Russia. The boy couldn't speak any English, so Mr. Martin gave him extra help evenings to teach him English. This boy proved to be an intelligent student, finishing school in fewer than the 8 years. This boy, Meyer Catch, is quite wealthy now. He runs the auto parts store in Fredonia and others in the state of Kansas. And longtime residents will certainly remember the store known as Catch's. Well, on April 18, 1956, an election was held to vote for a bond to build a new building, and it passed easily. The new building was ready for use by the middle of the 1956-57 school term. At one time, there were 72 pupils in school there. It was always recognized as an up-to-date school. At one time, it was rated Class B, then it moved to Class A, AA, and then a superior rating. Now, I have not discovered information about what the criteria was, and I don't know if it was the testing, the school's students' abilities, or if it was on some other criteria, but that school certainly was an excellent school. And of course, the final classes, or but school closed July 1, 1966 at consolidation. It is still in current use by USD 484 and largely for transportation building. But let's get back to those county superintendents. So the one after Fanny Butts was Fanny Lyon, and her name is spelled Lyon. So a little bit about her. Born in 1879, died in 1937. She married Fred Lyon, December 14, 1899. Fred died in 1906, and Fanny and Fred had 3 children. So she was very well thought of, and I do have a couple of pictures to share with you. By today's standards, I think we can all agree that she's a very attractive woman. She taught in the country schools in New Albany, Fredonia. She was principal at Mound School. Here's another picture, looks to be her and Fred. She is buried in the Fredonia Cemetery. Then we get to Beulah Kane. She was county superintendent 1935 to 1939. After that, she was a county clerk. So here we see, she's identified here. The one smoking has been unidentified. Everett Blair, Charles Duckworth, Hubert Harris, he was probably sheriff at that time, and Leslie York. And many of you watching may know those names. Here we have C.E. Strecker, who was county superintendent 1946 to 1959. He was a Fredonia High School basketball coach. I believe this is Ralph Bateman. And here is Carl Strecker on this side. Here he is with his wife. Look like something silly's going on there. Here we see his office in the courthouse. And look at the details in the picture. You see those really tall windows that were in the courthouse at one time. You see that his secretary's desk, his secretary was Grace Hoover, and this was in the 50s, this photograph, and her desk was right next to him. Here we see them on one of the benches around the courthouse square. Then we get to Louise Rankin in 1966 to 69. Here she is in 1947 as a first grade teacher. Right there in the photo, an enlargement right there. This was obviously later in life, and while this is a black and white photo, I've been told that her wardrobe was quite colorful, and she quite often had a little dog with her. So let's wrap this up with the end of the county school superintendents. And I will share with you an article that was in the Wilson County Citizen, June 30, 1969. And the headline is, Superintendent's Office Closes Out 111 Years. A dinner today in the basement of the Wilson County Courthouse honored the last of 28 county superintendents who have served Wilson County in over a century of educational growth. Mrs. Louise Rankin, a former teacher herself, will officially turn over the records of the county superintendent's office to the Register of Deeds at the close of business today, as the office of county superintendent will no longer exist as of July 1. Unification of districts over the state of Kansas has made obsolete the post which first was created in 1858 by the territorial legislature with authority to certify teachers. 1 year later, the county superintendent was assigned the task of organizing school districts in the territory. The Wyandotte Constitution, under which Kansas became a state, followed the pattern set by the territorial legislature and reinstated the office of county superintendent, which has served as a foundation stone in the state's educational structure. He was authorized to continue organizing school districts by dividing the county into a convenient number of such units. With convenience as the only state criterion to guide county superintendents, schools were established within walking distance of most pupils. The general practice was to build schoolhouses at 2-mile intervals, each within a district governed by a 3-man board. By 1896, 35 years after Kansas became a state, 9,284 districts had been formed in the state. The operation of this system required a veritable army of board members, which at that time numbered more than 27,000. As late as 1945, board members outnumbered the teachers in the state by several thousand. The county superintendent not only created school districts, but certified teachers, conducted programs for upgrading instruction, kept statistical records of the schools under his supervision, gave assistance to the state superintendent, answered questions about school law, made needed changes in school district boundaries, conferred with school boards, and supervised educational activities in the county. In fact, he was the chief school officer of the county from pioneer days and continued to fill that role until importance of the office declined when rural population shifted to urban areas. And that brings our telling of the county school superintendents to a close. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you joining us again. Good night.